speak on behalf of approximately 500 Madoff investors whom I represent, and I speak as well on behalf of every American who hopes to save enough money in his lifetime to retire on that money. I speak on behalf of every American who relies upon the brass plaque on his broker's desk, SIPC. We are told when we invest that every account is insured up to $500,000. And yet SIPC has taken the position in the Madoff case that the law doesn't apply to it. And if I had to grade the SEC's performance with respect to its essential function of protecting investors with respect to the Madoff case, I would give the SEC an F. The SEC, instead of enforcing the law against SIPC, which it is charged by Congress with the obligation to do, instead of enforcing the law, we now know that in January 2009, the SEC agreed with SIPC that for the first time in its history, it would not pay SIPC insurance to each Madoff victim based upon the investor's last statement. SIPC is an insurance entity established by Congress which has the power to assess the Wall Street firms to raise the funds to protect investors. The statute doesn't give SIPC the right to define how it's going to allow a claim. The statute mandates that a claim is based upon the customer's last statement. And yet, the SEC joined in SIPC's violation of the statute. This is not just my opinion. This is the opinion of Chairman Garrett, who has proposed H.R. 757. And in proposing H.R. 757, which is simply a clarification of the law, one could view H.R. 757 as a statement to the SEC, you cannot avoid the law, and SIPC cannot avoid the law. Mr. Garrett made a statement when he had introduced this bill that SIPC has violated the law and the trustee in the Madoff case has violated the law. If you recall, in 1970, when SIPC was enacted, investors were encouraged to relinquish the protection of having certificated securities. That was something that Wall Street wanted. And in exchange for relinquishment of that protection, investors were promised SIPC insurance. SIPC insurance was raised to $500,000 in 1978. It was never raised thereafter. But in the Madoff case, SIPC decided that was going to be too expensive for its Wall Street members, and so it was going to try to come up with an entirely new basis for insuring accounts. For the first time in SIPC's history, it decided it didn't insure the balance on the last statement. It only insured the net investment over the life of the account, which might have been 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. There is no evidence that any investor in today's stock market has of what he owns other than the statements he receives from his broker. We don't have the luxury of going back to certificated securities. The Internal Revenue Service relies upon those statements. Every investor relies upon those statements for planning their retirement, for planning their estate plans for their children. There is no basis in law for what the SEC did in this case. And this is not a question of insufficient funding for the SEC. This is a question of doing its mission, which is to protect the investor. Now, I'm not here to opine on whether or not Mr. Becker had a conflict of interest. I don't think there can be any doubt about it. But whether he advocated the constant dollar adjustment, which obviously reduced his own exposure, or whether he said to the SEC when he came on board in February 2009, you have made an illegal agreement with SIPC, which would have worked to his advantage, his judgment was clouded because everyone in the SEC forgot the law. There is one way to remedy this and to restore confidence in the capital markets for the average American, and that is to enact H.R. 757. Thank you.